I won't,
he thought to himself.
I said I wouldn't, so I won't.
He clenched his fists in resolve. This is all a mental game, one that he wasn't going to lose. A few fresh snowflakes somehow made their way through the thick layer of snow above them and landed on his outstretched leg. The blizzard had been going strong for about a week now, but at least this alcove offered some protection, so he even managed to get a small fire going. It wouldn't last, of course. Nothing does in these conditions, but for the moment, there was nothing more pleasant than warming up his limbs by the crackling flame. They'd been on the road for, well, he couldn't even really remember. At some point, he stopped being able to distinguish one corner of this cold wasteland from another, and judging by the weather, spring was still a ways off. He shuddered slightly as he felt his stomach cramp up. It's been so long since his last proper meal. If he could just eat a bit of something, anything. His eyes slowly trailed to the right.
No, he won't. There is no chance he could,
he said to himself. He had been thinking about it though. As much as he could try to deny it and lie to himself, the thought has crept into the back of his mind. And every single time his thoughts trailed away, it would bring them right back, clawing and gnawing at his brain. He unsheathed his knife. It was still sharp enough. If he wanted to, he totally could. Frustrated, he tossed the knife into the snow. He said he wouldn't. He resolved himself days ago. So why? Despite all that, was the body of his dead friend lying to his right evoking such hunger? According to legends, what this man would most likely soon become is something called a Wendigo, a mythical creature and or evil spirit, known to influence people and groups possessed by insatiable greed and hunger. And as it so happens, it will be the topic of today's video. I'll tell you everything we know about these entities, including appearance, behavior, origins, and creation, so you know what to do should you ever be unfortunate enough to run into one on a winter hike. So without any further ado, grab your warmest clothes, fill your thermos with hot cocoa, and let's go. To start us off, when talking about Wendigos, it is important to mention that being a folktale and all, depending on who you ask, their description, behavior, and just about everything varies, and thus, there is no such thing as 100% unified Wendigo lore. Instead, I'll often mention traits or features of the creature that only appear in certain retellings of the story. On the surface level, a Wendigo is a mythical creature or an evil spirit, which hails from Native American folklore, most specifically around the areas of modern-day Canada and northern USA. Though there are just about 24 ways to spell and pronounce its name, back in the day, it has been translated as meaning the evil spirit that devours mankind, with later translations also just mentioning cannibal or owl. Over time, it came to be associated with famine, starvation, and hunger, but also cold weather and winter, most likely due to how these two often connected back then. Now, there are seemingly several ways in which a creature like this may come to be created, with the most commonly mentioned one being a human resorting to cannibalism in order to survive. However, certain retellings also mention humans overpowered with greed, or simply ones that have had prolonged exposure to other Wendigos. Due to this strong link with humans, Wendigos are often depicted as either monsters with human characteristics, or humans turned monstrous. Their bodies are extremely skinny, almost skeletal, with bones being clearly visible under their faded grayish skin. They have glowing eyes, long fangs, and claws, and are sometimes described as covered with patches of discolored hair, with their lips and toes missing. Their bodies carry a strange, unclean odor of decay and decomposition, which is why they're often described as looking like gaunt, freshly dug up skeletons. I do have to mention here that in some variations they're also described as much larger than humans, pushing upwards to 15 feet in height, which also increases whenever they feed, explaining why they're always so skinny. Curiously enough, in some accounts, they have been compared to werewolves and even Bigfoot. In terms of behavior, well, let's just say these aren't the friendliest of creatures. Deeply malevolent and cannibalistic in nature, their influence evokes murder, greed, and the desire to consume human flesh in individuals who come into contact with them, but they're also capable of straight up possessing people and turning them into one of their own. They are faster, stronger, and stealthier than most humans, which combined with their relentless hunger makes them excellent hunters and killers. If that weren't bad enough, some variations also give them the ability to mimic human voices, or even possess magical powers over the weather. Obviously, being exposed to something like this would be enough to make one go crazy, and believe it or not, there is actually a real-life medical term describing this state, called Wendigo psychosis, referring to an intense craving for human flesh. Mentions of this condition, which many directly link to a Wendigo possession, can be traced as far back as 1661, with men consumed by insatiable hunger devouring other men to survive the cold hard winter. Numerous other cases have popped up over the years, with perhaps the most famous one being of a man who during a particularly hard winter ate his whole family despite being relatively close to other retrievable food supplies. Naturally, as we near closer to modern day, less people place weight on claims like these, and it came to be a heavily debated topic in the 1980s, with many claiming the condition is a hoax. If you are one who believes in the legends, then sadly, even though curing a person from a Wendigo possession isn't impossible, in most cases, death seems to be the only way to stop them. So, we now know what Wendigos are, how they are created, what they look like, and how they behave, but before I wrap this up, let me just quickly mention one more thing. Often, when you think about a Wendigo, you think of it as a creature or an animal, but when we look at the history of this myth, that wasn't always the case. In many situations, Wendigo traits would simply be used as a metaphor for a person, movement, or a group which was overly greedy or focused on excessive consumption. With this in mind, it was also used to simply describe negative effects, emotions, or situations which may not have involved cannibalism in any shape or form. But hey, I suppose next time you're taking a walk through the woods in the winter and your buddy in front of you starts looking mighty tasty, well, perhaps just remember that protein bar you packed before leaving, or else we might all be in a world of trouble. But that brings us to the end of the video, so I hope you all enjoyed and have something new and fun to think about next time you're taking a hike in the woods. If you liked this video, maybe consider leaving a like, commenting, or subscribing. All of those would be very much appreciated. And if there are other creatures or entities like this you would like me to cover, please make sure to leave that down in the comments as well. I would very much like to read it. Now with that, I'm gonna wish you all a beautiful rest of the day, and I'll see you in whatever next video I make. Bye bye.